Hey guys, today I'm going to be doing a book review on Fallen Skies by Philippa Gregory. Fallen Skies by Philippa Gregory takes place in post-World War I England, following wealthy war hero Stephen Winters and stage singer Lily Valance. Both are determined to forget about the war and move on with their lives. What follows is a rushed marriage that leads to repression, violence, and jealousy. For Stephen, the war has never truly gone, and the reality of what he did during the war will lead his life down a dark path, leaving Lily as a pawn in his new twisted, warped reality. Whew, another great book by Philippa Gregory, you guys. I've said this in the past. Philippa Gregory is one of my top favorite authors when it comes to historical fiction. And yeah, this is actually one of her older books. This book was actually, let me look and see when this one was actually published. Yeah, this was originally published back in 1993. So yeah, this is one of her old ones that she wrote, you know, before her Tudor and Plantagenet books and whatnot, if you're a fan of those series. So yeah, I was very intrigued and curious going into this how much I would enjoy it, and thank goodness I really enjoyed it, and I have a lot to say about it, you guys. I have a lot to say about it, so I'm going to try to keep this video as kind of brief as I can to get out all of my feelings about it. And yet, whether or not this book is for you, because there's definitely some important things to note about this book, because if you get on Goodreads, the reviews for this book are all over the place. There's some people who have a lot of overwhelming positivity towards it. There's people obviously kind of in the middle, and then people who are just very negative, but with good reason, that they just really hate this book and they just hate everything about it. So yeah, I'm going to personally get into why I enjoyed this book and whether or not you are the type of person who will enjoy it as well, because there are some things that are important to note if it's going to frustrate you or disappoint you or whatever, you know. So from the synopsis, like I mentioned, this is a book that takes place post-World War I. We're following a war hero named Stephen Winters. He's suffering from PTSD, but the thing is, he comes from the upper class, and during this time period, the upper class, you know, they kind of had that stiff upper lip thing, and if PTSD during this time was not a thing, you know. It was called shell shock, and men coming back from the war, if they had shell shock, a lot of times the way people would view it back in the day, I think especially the upper classes, they would view it as something disgraceful and embarrassing and something to be ashamed by. And kind of that's where Stephen is. He is upper class, he's wealthy, and he kind of refuses to acknowledge his issues and his problems and his shell shock, and yet even his surrounding family, they are embarrassed by his shell shock, essentially. So he refuses to acknowledge his problems, and he pretty much hides it. And then our other main character is Lily Valance. She's a singer. She comes, you know, from a lower class, essentially. And yeah, through a series of events, she meets Stephen, they get married, and it kind of turns into a thing that Lily ends up regretting that this marriage even happened. So that's kind of what you need to know about this book, pretty much. This book is ultimately, to me, what I was personally getting out of this book, and what I think Philippa Gregory was going for. This book is about, I think, deconstructing the romanticizing of war that we have. And I think the best way to explain that, you know, a lot of times, especially if you do read a lot of historical fiction, whether something takes place, you know, during World War I or World War II, or just any type of war through the centuries, a lot of times you'll have your male hero who's in the war, or he comes back and he's a war veteran now, And then he has a woman, and the woman, it's like her function sometimes is there to make him better, and that it's her job to make him better, essentially, and get him out of the funk that he's in, essentially, get him out of the PTSD or whatever. And then in turn, like, there's a happily ever after sometimes. And that's really not the case with this book and what Philippa Gregory is doing. Like I said, I think this book is really kind of taken away that romantic notion we have of war and war heroes and romances during war, because the reality is not a fairy tale. The reality is not picture perfect, and that's what I really appreciated about this book. Because what you also need to know, this is the big thing you need to know about this book, you guys. The characters, Stephen and Lily, your two characters, Stephen and Lily, are rather despicable characters, you guys. You are not, let me be very blunt about this, you are not going to like Stephen or Lily. Okay, you are going to be a lot more sympathetic towards Lily. I'll kind of talk about them individually. You're definitely going to be more sympathetic towards Lily, but yeah, Stephen, for instance, Stephen is a jackass. He's a jerk. He's elitist. He has a lot of pride and ego. And he just feels like things should be handed to him on a silver platter. And like I mentioned, he refused to acknowledge his problems and whatnot. And the thing is, I think what Philippa Gregory kind of does brilliantly with this novel as well, you know, even though Stephen is suffering from shell shock or PTSD, the thing is that is not an excuse for his attitude and his behavior and his actions over the course of this novel. You know what I mean? The thing is, the war just exasperated what was already wrong with him to begin with before even going to war, if that makes sense. Because yeah, like I mentioned, Stephen, he's an elitist. He thinks things should come to him on a silver platter. He's very rude and egotistical, and yeah, the things that he does and says to Lily once they are husband and wife, it's very abusive and problematic, and it's not this fairy tale, you know, it's not this fairy tale that some historical fiction might do, where the hero and the heroine get together and they're fighting their inner demons together and they have a happily ever after, you know? That's not the case. Their relationship is very abusive. And yeah, he hits her sometimes, he says terrible, cruel things to her. So yeah, as I said, the war just exasperated what was already wrong to begin with him. I think that's very cleverly done by Philippa Gregory, because it's just so interesting with the Stephen character, because there's sometimes that you do want to sympathize with him because he is genuinely suffering from PTSD, and you want to sympathize with him on that degree. But on another level, just the things that he does, the PTSD is no excuse for some of his actions and the things that he says, you know. So Stephen he's a very complicated character. I definitely kind of view him as the antagonist of this book, you know. And then Lily, like I said, even Lily, you're not going to particularly like Lily in this character. It's going to take you a very long time to even like her, but I do think you sympathize with her. Because one of the things about Lily that I just really found despicable is kind of her look at the war as well. Because the way Philippa Gregory describes Stephen and Lily, Stephen is much older than Lily, because I kind of got the idea that Stephen was maybe in his early 30s, and then Lily I think is supposed to be about 18 or 19, so yeah, he's quite a bit older than her. So yeah, Lily, she's very young, very naive, and she's constantly talking about that the war messed up her life, it ruined her life, the war made life no fun, and now the war is over and all these people are coming back and everyone's still sad and depressed. So she's very vain and selfish about the war, you know, during the war and after the war. And yeah, she makes it very obvious. Like, she's out on the street one day and she's walking by a homeless man, and the homeless man is begging for some money. And yeah, he's a war veteran. He has a little sign that says he's a war veteran. I think he's even missing a limb. And Lily is just so put off and disgusted by this guy, and she kind of starts yelling at him and saying terrible things like, I don't care if you're a war veteran, this and that, or whatever. She is very blunt and honest about her opinions. So there's that thing about her that was really despicable, just her views of the war and how she treats other people sometimes. And then yeah, even Stephen, once she's married to Stephen, she is embarrassed because Stephen does have some moments, like, I think at one point a car backfires and he gets frightened and he dunks behind something and like just crawls into himself, and Lily is so embarrassed by that. You know, instead of helping her husband, she's embarrassed and she's like, oh my god, is anybody looking, you know? So yeah, Lily has her moments of being just really despicable and very unlikable. But like I said, the moments when you start sympathizing with her and you're totally on her side are those moments when Stephen does start to get abusive and hateful and violent. And yeah, it's like, okay, this is going too far. Yeah, I definitely am on Lily's side during this, you know. So as far as reading the book goes, this book is definitely it kind of reads like a slow burn, I'd say, because a lot of times I was reading the book thinking to myself, okay, where exactly is this going? What is Philippa Gregory trying to say? Where is she going with this? And you literally do kind of have to get to the end of this book, and once you get to those ending images, then a lot of this book does come together and make sense, and the themes and messages start coming together with what Philippa Gregory was trying to do. Because yeah, like I said, what I took away from this book was definitely the de-romanticizing of war and war heroes and whatnot, and really looking at the tough reality of war and what that does to people. And I hope that's what other people get out of this book as well, because it's one of the most striking, powerful messages of this book, I think. But it does read kind of slowly at first, and it really kind of builds and builds and builds to the point that's like, okay, where is this going? Where is the climax of this story going? And it ends in just such a brutal, shocking way that's kind of like, wait, this is the ending? But I love that. I really love the ending of this book, and it's just such a fantastic book in my opinion. And like I said, you're either going to love this or hate it. It just really depends on you, what you are personally taking away from this book. So yeah, how would I recommend this, I suppose? I mean, if you like Philippa Gregory, then pick this book up, because you'll probably like it if you do like her already. If you're someone who has a very tough time with problematic characters, problematic relationships, if you find that thing distressing and annoying, you might not want to pick this book up. But yeah, if you're fine with unlikable characters like I am, because I personally, sometimes I really enjoy unlikable characters, because it's like, oh god, I hate these people so much, but I'm enjoying the drama. So if you're like that, if you enjoy unlikable characters and you like the drama and just the stupidity that goes on sometimes, pick this book up. So you guys, that is it for my review of Fallen Skies by Philippa Gregory. I had a lot more to say on my Goodreads review. I went into quite a lot more detail about certain things on my written review. But yeah, it was so long. I practically wrote a novel about my thoughts about this book, so there was no way I was going to do an entire video on all my individual little thoughts, or this video would be very, very long. So yeah, if you are curious about some more other little details, I definitely recommend going to my Goodreads account and checking out my very lengthy review there. But yeah, you guys, have you guys read Fallen Skies by Philippa Gregory? Do you plan on reading it? Just let me know. So that's it for this video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and if you like this video, you may like these other videos. Bye guys.